Layla, come here. Hey, what sound does a bear make? Yeah. All right, we got a fun one today. I had this design in my head for a while, but really we just sort of flew by the seat of our pants and designed as we went, with the only constraint being the height and width of this window in the entry of my house. So let's jump into the build. I think you're really gonna like this one. All right, so like I said, we're winging it. I've got this slab that we have just taken out of inventory. And as you can see, like most woodworkers, I am terrible at using scraps that I save. I try and save less than I used to, but I always, you know, like all of us, we like, oh, it's walnut. So we're gonna try and only use scraps today. And my window is about 49, 50 inches long, and I want it to kind of fit under there perfectly. So we're gonna cut a section out of the slab, which actually just fits in my planer, so we don't have to do a big whole slab flattening thing. But if you do want to flatten slabs, I have a video right here linked in the corner that walks you through how to flatten slabs. We're going to do what's called skip planing, where we run it through the planer and just flip it over every time. And we should get pretty flat. I mean, for something like this, I'm not worried about getting it so dead perfect that you could run a pair of calipers around it, but we want to get it pretty close. So we're going to clean up this slab, and we're going to find some scraps for the legs. I got a really cool design in my head, and I'll show you. I'll draw it a little bit later. All right, so we've got our slab planed, and like I said before, we're skip planing. I'm not worrying about it being super parallel and flat, and here's the benefits and drawbacks. Benefits, super simple, fast. However, it is going to manifest itself throughout the entire project. So as you can see, I got a little bit of a rock in these two corners, and knowing that, I'm okay with it because I know how to fix it later down the road. And I will show you how I do that, but the way it's gonna manifest itself is we're gonna build a frame for the base. And when it gets attached to the top, it's going to twist the frame a little bit. So I know that going in, and that's why I was okay skip planing. But when you do something like this, that's the reason that parallel and flat are so important, is because when you have something that's off, it's going to continue to manifest itself throughout the rest of the project. So I know how to deal with it, and I'm going to just be okay with it because it's an easy fix on something of this size. But if I was doing a kitchen table, there's no way that I would do this, because when you have that great of a distance, it's just going to become a much, much bigger problem down the road. So as far as my base goes, let me show you the design in my head. So here's kind of the measurements I came up with. What I'm also going to add too, because we're going to go with like 1.5 by 1.5 inch legs, maybe 1.25. And so those are going to be really slender. And if you didn't add something down here at the bottom, they would be really sort of bendy and wobbly. And so what we're actually going to do, we're going to create like a little shelf, but using sort of the same kind of thing we're doing here, except we're going to have one skinny guy across in the back and the front like this. And then instead of like a full shelf, we're just going to do like one shelf in the middle, and that'll really tie it together. It's going to add rigidity, and it'll be cool. You can put like a little book down there, some sort of decoration that'll really tie the room together, as they say. One last thing I want to say about choosing your leg stock is you really want to look for wood with diagonal lines through it. I believe it's called rift sawn, and the reason is that you're going to get straight grain on four sides. And when you cut something long and skinny, ladies, gents, in a square like that, it's going to really have a tendency to twist unless you sort of pick your grain. So you want to pick grain that sort of runs diagonal across your piece. Rift sawn wood, it's going to give you a better leg stock. I decided, we were just looking at it, we're going to go with 1 1/8 by 1.5 inch rectangle legs. And we may thin out the bottoms a little bit later, but just the very bottoms, we'll see. That's the fun of designing as you go. So we're going to rip 4 legs out of the edge of this board, because in here you start to get plain sawn where you get the middle growth rings. So we're just going to use this portion for our legs, and then we'll use whatever for the stretch. All right, so we have all our pieces cut, all of our horizontal, our legs, we have our top. We just have to cut those vertical members that are gonna go in between these little guys. Yeah, I have a confession. I had to go to the lumber store and buy F4S kiln dried lumber, which is so expensive. It's really kind of an argument for why you should get a joiner. They're super expensive compared to maybe other tools, but you can buy rough sawn lumber. And I have to drive an hour to get rough sawn. We're trying to get this video done before Christmas. And so I didn't do it, and I paid the price. And one of the problems with kiln dried lumber is sometimes there's some pressures inside when you cut them. You know, I took 8-quarter lumber and cut it down to 1-inch squares, and it went wonkier than like John Malecki in a ballet competition, because they are like really wild now and twisted. But we're gonna be able to solve that with those vertical members, because we're gonna cut dados. It's gonna pull everything in. We'll probably thin these out a little bit more on the planer and figure out our joinery method, either the domino, or I'm gonna use those Miller dowels that I used in the stool build. I think those could be really cool, except we're gonna run into some alignment issues where they might be drilling through each other. Either way, we're gonna figure out something cool to do with that. I'm gonna cut the dados in these for those cross members. And then we're gonna start putting our base together, and we'll do a glue up today, and then we'll get it finished tomorrow when we get back to it. All right, it's time for some joinery. I decided to use the domino. We're gonna use like the smallest dominoes that they make, or at least that I have. And one thing that's really important, whether you're doing mortise or tenon or dowels or using the Miller dowel system, you wanna label your parts really well. So what I did here to really help myself is I labeled all my legs in the direction I wanna face, with which way is the long way, the short way. I drew a little square. Those are the two sides I'm gonna be using for the joinery, where I'm gonna be measuring off of those reference faces. I'm gonna go ahead and do all my legs first. We're gonna go 1 inch down, and then 5 inches down, and then 4 inches up from the bottom to do the crossbars for the shelf, the stretchers for the shelf. So we're gonna go ahead and get that done, and then we're gonna dry fit it and see what we're looking like, make sure everything's all good. We'll cut our shelf, and then we'll secure that, and then we'll start our glue up. And what I think I'm gonna do on these, we'll probably put these cross pieces in first. We'll glue those in, let those set up for about 10 minutes, and then glue everything together. That'll give us one last chance if anything goes super wonky. God, I probably said wonky like 100 times in this video. Take a shot every time Jonathan says wonky. All right, let's get into some joinery. All right, now here's a great little trick. We're gonna do these pieces, and we need them to be pretty exact because we're doing the small domino size holes. But here's a great little trick with calipers. I have a great 2-minute Tuesday on calipers as well, which will be linked in the corner. So I measured the width of all my pieces. They're all the same because they went through the planer at the same time. They're 0.916. Half of that is 0.458. And this little guy at the end of your calipers is a depth gauge. So you lock your calipers in right at the halfway mark, and then you can just take it to your square. Boom. And you know that that is exactly 0.458. And then I can use this to mark my dead center with a pencil and not have to worry about using a marking gauge and leaving a deep groove in there that I'd have to sand out later. So we're gonna finish these up, and then we're gonna do a little dry fit. Well, a lot has happened since that last shot that you saw. I'm sure you probably saw the video where I hurt my thumb on the jointer. I've used the jointer twice since then, and it is terrifying, but sometimes you just have to face your fears. So we're gonna jump back into this. What happened was I did all the dominoes for this and stupidly didn't measure. I just assumed because these pieces were 5 inches, the dominoes would be 5 inches apart, but that makes no sense. I don't know why I didn't think of that. So I have fixed the legs. In the process, I lost about 1/8 of my thumb. I'll link that video right here if you want to go watch it. But one of the biggest things to come out of that is we are going to be doing a video. We're going to bring in somebody who's either a trained trauma surgeon or works in a trauma center to talk about shop accidents, what you should do if the unthinkable happens. First time I've ever said this in a video, but give me a thumbs up because I can't do it myself. Glue up time. What we're gonna do, we're gonna do this in steps. We're gonna do the side pieces first. And while those are being glued up, we're gonna glue up the stretcher assemblies, and then we'll let those dry, and then we'll put everything together, and we'll put that shelf in last because that way we don't accidentally misalign these two stretchers and then have the table get all wonky, like my thumb, wonky. That's 2 shots if you're playing the home game. Let's get into glue up, and then we're gonna get into kind of sanding and shaping this. I'm gonna take a little bit of weight off the bottom of the legs. We'll do some roundovers. We'll get everything nice and clean, and then we'll attach the tabletop. All right, we have the base glued up and we just need to attach the top, do a little bit of sanding and put some finish on it. I'm gonna be using satin lacquer, which is one of my favorites to use because it's really easy to apply, sprays really nicely, dries really fast, and looks great. One of the biggest questions I get when attaching tops is how do you plan for wood movement? Now, wood moves across the width of the board, so we are in luck with this piece specifically because it is very, very narrow, so it's gonna move very, very little. I like to sort of, as an average, give myself some extra room, say that wood's gonna move about 1/8 of an inch over 4 feet. It's gonna vary between climates and types of wood, but that is a pretty good rule of thumb, especially that gives me a little bit of leeway because typically, you know, I think it's more like 1/8 over 8 feet. So this piece is 1 foot wide, and that means it's gonna move a 32nd between seasons in Southern California. So I'm gonna drill some oversized mortises. We'll do floating tenons. But one of the easiest ways to do tables is there's these figure 8 washers. I'll put a link down below if I can find them. I wish I had those because it makes it just easy as can be and is a very secure way to attach top and with no concern for wood movement. So we're gonna do that. I'm gonna clamp some boards here. We'll do some magic with the domino. Before I glue the top, I'm going to sand everything and get everything ready to go on the base. But you want to do your joinery before you start doing any sanding. Make sure everything fits because when you start sanding and altering flat faces, it could make it harder to do that joinery later. So let's get this thing wrapped up. we have a wobble, as I said we would. Now this base was completely flat before I put the top on, and because I didn't take the time to flatten my top, this is the consequence, but we knew that going in. So we're gonna fix that. Now this is a minor one. You can measure it. Basically, you're gonna have 2 high corners and 2 low corners. And so you can measure it. It's about a 1/16. So we want to split that. So we want a 32nd. There's a lot of ways to do it. If you're using felt pads for your feet, you could put a 32nd shim underneath your felt pad. That's one way to do it. But here's a great technique that I love. I love these feet. I use them for cutting boards. I'll link them down below. You can buy them in packs of like 120. And what's great about them is they're compressible at different rates. So what I can do is screw the ones that go into the low corners less than I screw in the high corners, the ones that don't wobble, that don't lift up and down. I can screw them in at different rates, giving me about, I don't know, a 32nd to a 16th worth of adjustment. So I'm gonna put these on. These feet will get just barely hand tightened, whereas the opposite foot on the same side will get tightened a lot, and that should compensate for the wobble. So let's go ahead and put these in. All right, so as you can see, no more wobble. There's lots of ways to do this. You can obviously trim the legs. I think I saw Mark Spagnola once do it where he put his table saw blade up a 64th and he passed the high legs over it because your table saw is flat. Obviously, you couldn't do it with a table this big. There's some great ones that screw in and out that are really great for adjusting, but you know, having a wobbly table as a furniture maker is just part of the game, and you learn ways to overcome it. Wow, guys, this came out incredible, and the way it looks in my house is just incredible. I love the fact that it fits the width and the height of my window frame, which is what's great about when you design and build your own furniture. There's lots of ways you could do this joinery with dowels, or those Miller dowels that I used in the stool build. It came out wonderful. What would I change? What mistakes did I make? As far as what I would change, I would do a lot more sanding prior to glue up. This took me like 4 hours to sand today, and it was just a nightmare. So I would have done a lot more sanding. You, of course, don't want to sand where your joinery meets up, because then you can alter the shape and then you might get some gaps. Other than that, I would sand all these pieces, do my roundovers and all that beforehand. The way that we took weight off the legs, it was a minor amount of stock removal with a major impact. I think it really looks good the way the legs came out, and that was just we basically took the corners off at about, I don't know what that angle is, a shallow angle, but we took them off, and I just using a block plane, and then I just made sure not to sand them, so you kept those really crisp, sharp edges. The lacquer looks great, and I'm really, really happy with this. Let me know down in the comments what you would do differently. Maybe add some different width shelves at varying distances from each other, what you like about it. Happy New Year, guys. It's the first of the year. If you want to support the channel, head over to the Katz-Moses store, pick up a dovetail jig, a stop block, or an apron. Stay safe in the shop, guys. Give me a thumbs up because I can't do it myself. Have a wonderful day.